I think we're there.
Okay.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Uh,
How's it going, brother Mark?
it is. It is going about just like every other day for the last 16 months.
So, just to let people know who you are, your name is Mark Metheny, and you are my astrological antipode, and you are a 29 Pisces, and I'm a 29 Virgo. So it's always kind of an interesting time when we get together, kind of merge these two worlds. And you're a really gifted astrologer, and you know a lot about pop culture and sports and all kinds of other interesting stuff, some historical stuff. You put together things in a really interesting way. So it's always great to connect with you and kind of throw something out there and see what we can do together. Um, so you're in Ohio, correct? That's where you are. Is that
Correct.
right? Right.
Correct.
Can you give people kind of a sense, because you said sort of the same as the last 16 months. The weird thing that's happened now, we're in this whole Gemini phase, and everything seems to be so balkanized, and one area is this way, another area is this way, and where I live, my life is virtually not changed one iota. But that's not the same for everybody that's in this country or in this world, for that matter. So maybe for people that are not familiar with what's going on with Ohio, can you give them a sense as to that?
Yeah. So the North Node in Gemini thing is obvious here because it's Ohio is very much kind of split. Like the uh, the Democratic Party has completely taken over Columbus, Ohio. You won't even you won't even have a Republican run for mayor anymore. And when I was growing up in like the 70s and 80s, like there was a Republican mayor there when I lived in Columbus for a good while. Now it's complete woke culture, complete Democrat owned. They have the mayor. So like it's so bad. A couple years ago, a couple police officers were assassinated by this dude in one of the suburbs of Columbus. The ultra woke Democrat mayor of Columbus, uh, in the last year, has tried to put a citizen security council together, and he actually put the attorney who defended the guy who assassinated the two police officers on the security council to oversee police investigations. And they tormented and ran the last two Columbus police chiefs out of town. And they've now hired someone from the Detroit Police Department, of course, known for their incredible stability, and it's not like their mayor was arrested on whatever he was arrested on a couple years ago. So it is totally, so like we got out of Dodge when we saw what was coming. We're like, okay, we're not going to be surrounded by a bunch of neighbors and stuff like that. So we are like you. If you need any advice on septic systems and stuff like that, we're in a 120-year-old farmhouse. So we got out of Dodge, and like I think where we are is pretty much like where you are. We're close to like a small town, and we just luckily we've been working from home for the last year and a few months. Ohio is very divided. Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, probably 80% Democrat. And then you get out of there, some of the suburbs have gone kind of woke. Everything else is Republican. You get out of the major cities, and it's like Republican.
Right.
So Ohio definitely, and Ohio being a Pisces state also, with all this Pisces, Neptune, Gemini square activity we've had the last 4 or 5 months. It's very evident here, and like so we've got a Republican governor.
Is that DeWine? Is that your
The
governor?
one,
Is
and
it? But that's such a Piscean name, isn't it? The
yeah,
wine.
yep,
Yeah,
yep.
it's Bacchanalian and Piscean. Yeah.
So I have my tentacles everywhere, just from all my different careers and stuff, from sports statistics and astrology and export and everything else I've done.
Let's talk about the export stuff, because you might have some insight into that world with the Baltic Dry Index, supply chain, shipping. What kind of insight can you share with us from that part of your life?
Okay, so I work for a small freight forwarder. We have our location. We just have one customer. We have one really, really, really huge, ridiculously huge customer. And so we hit the Suez Canal thing and all that other stuff. That affected us. We had getting freight to go to Australia or New Zealand has become treacherous, just because having to go to the other side of the world. And then like New Zealand had a couple earthquakes, I think, or in a volcanic eruption, not to a mild one not too long ago. And so just freight going to that side of the world is just insane. Now, also there's a shortage of truck drivers.
Right. Yeah.
And so with these battles too, between tariffs, there's this battle of well, ideally how export is supposed to work is you have a certain amount of empty containers coming back from overseas or coming back with freight, and then you have containers going out overseas. But like there's been all these kind of bunches and bundles to where there's shortages on one end of the other. Like we had too many containers for a while at the end of the Bush administration, with because he had the additional compliance issues he was trying to put on China. But now like it's kind of reversed, and like you can't get enough stuff. So there's all kinds of shortages, and in retrospect, a stupid industry to get in. In
Well,
retrospect, because
well,
it's always chaos. Any chaos
right.
anywhere in the world, and you're affected.
But it fits your sign in a lot of ways.
It does. It does.
You know, you're out there, you know, shipping lanes, travel lanes, all that stuff, right?
Yeah. So if anybody has any doubts that astrology is real, I have a Moon Jupiter midheaven stellium in Cancer, and my 10th in Cancer, trine my Sun, and I ship like 500 million cans of cat food a week.
There you go.
The ocean.
Right, and this is not sidereal astrology either. This is
right.
This is Placidus and all that good stuff.
Right.
You know, speaking
of animals of the world.
Speaking of Cancer midheaven, somebody sent me a video last night of Yes performing 2017 at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in, of course, your part of the world, Cleveland, 2017. Not that long ago, 4 years ago, although with those guys, 4 years is now a long time.
You're right.
But I was really surprised at how good the band sounded. They sounded really good. And there's John Anderson hitting all those notes that he was hitting in the 70s, and now he is in his 70s. So I decided to take a look at John Anderson's chart. And he has Cancer midheaven.
And Scorpio Sun.
He's got not only a Scorpio Sun, Mercury in Scorpio. He's got that Venus-Mars conjunction in Scorpio. And it's that total like androgyny thing, right? I mean, you see this with Venus-Mars people. Are they male? Are they female? Like, you know, because there's a side of Anderson that's like really kind of feminine, right? And he's got that Venus-Mars thing going on. But he also has his moon, which is moving towards, right? It's ingressing towards the midheaven. I think he's got a moon. He's got Saturn also in the 10th house in Cancer, but he's got this moon in Gemini, and it's entwined with Jupiter in Libra, which is conjunct Neptune in Libra, which is in his conjunct his ascendant. So he's got all this Libra on his ascendant, but he has let's see, no, Uranus in Gemini, Moon in Aquarius. That was it. So he's got this grand air trine, and you can hear like that come through in his music. Like you can hear this kind of like very sort of inspirational, airy, kind of quasi-religious sort of lyrics that come through Yes's music, and it's right there in Anderson's chart. It's a very interesting chart in a lot of ways.
I've got about probably 500 musicians in my database here. That's funny you mentioned that, because you pretty much you somewhat described my chart there, because I've got the Libra ascendant and the Mars. Yeah, he's got a Sun, Mercury, Mars stellium.
Yep.
I've got Mars retrograde in Scorpio in the first house conjunct my South Node, and then I've got the Libra ascendant also. But my Venus is in opposition to that.
Yeah. So it's always interesting looking at certain performers and then looking at their their charts. I think the other guy, the same person, sent me another video, and the video was Lindsay Buckingham's newest song. Like he just came out with a new record. And I was more of kind of a Bob Welch, Fleetwood Mac guy in a lot of ways than a Buckingham Nicks sort of version. But I had to say that the song was good. And again, another guy with a super interesting chart. Leo rising, Mars Pluto conjunction in Leo. Like, wow. And then he's got 3 planets in Libra, I think. And then he's got Venus in Scorpio, squaring his ascendant, squaring Mars, squaring Pluto. And you can see all the Fleetwood Mac stuff is showing up there, right? In that, in fact, I have the chart here. Let me just throw it up there. It's a really interesting chart. And I think I have John Anderson's chart here too. So this is Lindsay Buckingham's chart. There's that, look at that. He's got Pluto exactly conjunct his ascendant. And then Mars just 1 degree. I mean, that's like super creative, right? That is super, like it would take somebody like this in some ways to kind of wrestle control that band from Mick Fleetwood.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
He'd have to have that. And then there's that Venus in Scorpio and squaring off against Mars and Pluto and the ascendant and all that kind of weird, druggy, under power stuff. Like, okay, well, Mick Fleetwood says, all right, you're going to take the band. Well, I'm going to take Stevie Nicks. And then the whole thing just gets super kind of, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Incestuous. And it's right here. You can see it, right? I mean, again, if you want to like see astrology in action, just look at some of these people and how events and how their creativity unfolds in their life. And again, somebody with a Aquarian moon. We're going to talk about the Aquarian moon today with the United States chart. You got any thoughts on Lindsay Buckingham here?
Well, yeah, I mean, with that Mars Pluto conjunction there in Leo, also you have that power struggle and control wrestling. And then too, funny, you've got the Sun, Mercury, Neptune stellium down there in Libra, which is probably trine. I know Stevie Nicks is Gemini, so that's probably trine a lot of her stuff.
Yep. And the thing with Lindsay Buckingham too, if you listen to his music, it is not discordant. Like it is not discordant. And that's where you get the Sun, Mercury, Neptune, and Libra, very kind of, harmonious, kind of poppy. Even the new stuff sounds very kind of airy and poppy. There's no real discord in Lindsay Buckingham's kind of musical repertoire. Although I'm sure he could probably, channel it with Pluto on the ascendant. That's just not how he's wired. It's so fascinating looking at some of these charts. And then let's look at the John Anderson chart real quick, just to give people an idea of what we're talking about with him. So here's the John Anderson chart. Oops. Is this it? Yeah. So here we go. Yeah, Uranus in Gemini, Moon in Aquarius, and then he's got that trine with Jupiter, Neptune just hanging off the ascendant here, and it's a Neptune trine. My bad. It's the Neptune trine. So it's Uranus, Neptune, and the Moon. Jupiter not quite in the mix at 19 Virgo, but then he's got that Libra midheaven. And again, with Libra on the ascendant, even though yes could be a bit discordant at times, like John Anderson was not a screamer. He was much more, again, kind of melodic and sort of, he had that high falsetto voice or borderline falsetto. Any thoughts about this chart?
Yeah, just like what you were touching there on, kind of like the androgynous thing a little bit. Just go look at any pictures of, yes, I mean, I've never seen a picture of John Anderson or any concert footage where he's got like a shirt and a pair of pants on. I can never identify anything he's ever worn. It all looks like, and you look at like that Libra on the ascendant, like everything he wears is like long flowing, like priest garb, or like you can't, like, I'm like, are those baggy pants? Is he wearing like a skirt or a kilt?
Right.
I can never identify what he's wearing ever.
In all fairness, this was late when I was looking at the chart last night. It looks like he's got Venus in Sagittarius. So I thought it was like 8 degrees or 9 degrees Scorpio. So it's not. So he doesn't have like a true Mars-Venus conjunction, but they follow each other astrologically. But there is a bit of that. And again, Aquarian moon, like Lindsay Buckingham, although much earlier in the mix there. But yeah, I think I think some of that also has to do with Libra rising and being ruled by Venus. So you're a Libra rising. How do you, as a guy, right? Because you're a guy and you're into sports and a lot of guy stuff. How do you deal with the Libra rising? Venus sort of ruling your chart as a man. And how has that affected you in some ways, like moving through life and growing up?
Right. So my chart is almost like I have like 6 things in a water grand trine: Sun, Chiron, Neptune, Jupiter, midheaven, Moon, and then I've got like Saturn and Aries conjunct my Sun, and then I've got this weird Venus-Mars opposition, and they're conjunct my nodes. So I have like heavy female energy. So also like I've got all that water, but they're all in my fire houses in like 1, 5, and 9. And I've got a Jupiter station in the 9th, and I've got 5 planets in the houses that they rule. I've got Mars in the 1st, Sun in the 5th, Venus in the 7th.
But they're water, like they're water in fire houses. That's interesting.
And so that so I'm like 62% introvert and like 38% extrovert. Like I can get on a show or at a conference or something, and I can like talk for 3.5 hours, and like people start leaving. I'm like, no, I'm not done yet. I can like extrovert like all day, but then I need I like having my research time, and then I like being able to go blab, all the weird stuff that I find that nobody else really cares about. But the Libra ascendant kind of covers up my rough edges, because I've got the Mars and Scorpio retrograde in the 1st house, conjunct my South Node. So
that's such an interesting opposition with Venus on your true node in Taurus, right? So again, very feminine and about relating and about kind of releasing, like, oh, well, this is where you need to be in this lifetime, right? But back it up, you got Mars on the other side. South node is sort of like, well, guess what? You're not really done here. You got to
Right.
figure out how to integrate this male side of this equation. It's really interesting. Ricky Williams, let's get into a little sports here. Ricky Williams, who some people might be familiar with, very enigmatic Gemini, late degree Gemini, Heisman Trophy winner, University of Texas, went to the NFL, and then got into like wanting to get high. And the reason why is because he had a lot of trauma in his past. And there's a really great 30 by 30 documentary about him, Run, Ricky, Run. And so he's got Mars conjunct his South Node. And he talks about that. He's got a Venus Mars conjunction in Aries conjuncting his South Node.
Mm.
So he has to like go through this kind of warrior phase and through football. And it's very interesting looking at his chart and he's got Cancer on the midheaven as well. So, and I think his true node is in Cancer. It's a really, so he's had to deal with that. He's had to deal with like wanting to be like more Libran, with that true node in Libra and finding balance in his life. But at the same time, he's got this baggage from another kind of incarnation or another part of his psyche that he's got to integrate. And I think he did a pretty good job of it for the most part. I have a lot of respect for Ricky, and I think he's a pretty good astrologer too. He's an acolyte of Stephen Forrest. So how do you feel like you've been able to integrate these two fixed polarities in your life?
I mean, yeah, to some degree. I mean, it's that Venus Mars opposition. So just what that is essentially is like, you're too nice and you get taken advantage of, and you overreact too strongly the other way. And so it's like it's finding that, balance of, same thing with the introvert extrovert. It's like I can do the extrovert thing, but then I have to bounce back, like, the Pisces psychic sponge thing. Then you're like drained and exhausted. And so so it's like it's being able to literally like trying to flip switches in my brain. Same thing with I've got all the Pisces energy, but then I've got the fairly tight Uranus Pluto conjunction in Virgo. So analytical detailed stuff wasn't always a strong point, but then I found I could flip that switch. And I found that's what a lot of it is figuring out how to psychologically flip that switch to the different parts of your chart when you need it, and when to try and back off of the other. It's like, okay, too strong.
All right, so I have two more questions about your chart, and then we'll jump into the US chart here. So in astrology, when you've got oppositions, one of the things that is considered to reconcile the opposition is to find the midpoint, like the meeting point between those two oppositions. So for you, that would be what, Leo? Is that right?
Yeah, that would be. Oh wait, okay. My
So you got
Venus
Taurus.
Mars are in super low degrees, so it might actually be the Aquarius.
Because it's moving up. Versus. So you're going from Scorpio to Aquarius, and then you're going to take that midpoint right there. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I would probably take that midpoint over the Leo one.
Right. So have you?
Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, that is totally not right. No, well, that's right.
So have you found that if you're able to engage in some kind of Aquarian mediation between those two poles, that you could kind of get out of that oppositional kind of dilemma at times, like be more detached, less personalized? Does that work for you?
Yeah, because I also have like my part of fortune is in Aquarius also. So yeah, I found that being able to flip to the detached mad scientist works a lot for me to get out of and that's why astrology in general had worked for me, because just being a giant ball of emotion the first 20 some years of my life I found that having something, physical, black and white to look at helped me get things in balance and then just not be a constant slave to whatever emotional whim I had at that second.
Good. These are really good pieces of information for people to wrap their heads around, because sometimes charts can be very difficult to reconcile. And I don't believe there's any such thing as a bad chart. Okay, I want to disabuse people of that notion. But there are charts that are harder than other charts. It's just the way it is. And there's an upside to being able to figure this stuff out and learn and live through it. And especially with a chart like yours, and you've got that Sun Saturn conjunction. Is that right? You got the Sun Saturn. So theoretically, the best is yet to come for you, right? With that Sun Saturn, like after you integrate everything, you get to kind of step into a maturity and understanding, kind of a self-mastery around that. And I guess you've got Neptune approaching that, right?
But in that late 2024 to early 2026 area, when we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction.
Yeah, right at the end of Saturn, yeah.
And also the North Node hits in there during part of it. And also there's a Mars transit. Mars hits in there during that period. So yeah, so I'm going to have, and like Saturn and Neptune do multiple stations right on my Sun and Saturn, or the midpoint in between. So that I've been pointing to that area for a few years. It's like, I can't decide if it's going to be like, become some like ascended master or like be abducted by aliens.
Yeah,
Probably
yeah.
the alien thing is more likely, but who's counting?
I think there's some really interesting potential for that with you. Like you could just become a completely different person in some ways, and maybe just I don't know, maybe like a walk-in or something.
I've had the most bizarre like spiritual experiences of my life, like the last 6 or 7 years, because my Mercury's at the lower degrees of Pisces. So when like Neptune stationed on my Mercury and stuff, I was like, there was stuff happening that like there's like no explanation for.
Right.
So like we're getting close to like the Neptune moving back and forth over my Chiron is coming up next.
Yeah.
And then Sun, Saturn, and then too, when it's in the late Pisces there, it's trine all the other planets in my water grand trine. So.
And you're at 29 Pisces. You're at the anaretic degree, right?
I'm like 6.5 hours, I think, from being in Aries.
Right.
I'm 29:46.
Right. So what's that like for you? For people that don't know, the anaretic degree is the final degree of the sign. And theoretically, there's nothing left. It's like this 0 point with the sign. And it's often on around the 22nd or the 21st, you're dealing with that 29 degree. So we're getting into some interesting kind of numerological associations. But for you, you're the last degree of the zodiac. So you're not just anaretic like sun sign, you're anaretic zodiac. Like,
anaretic zodiac.
What is that like?
So I guess all I know is as my perspective of it. So it's hard to, what was the reptilian that died the other day? Rumsfeld has that famous saying of you know what you know, and you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know.
The knowns, the knowns, yeah.
So I mean, my perception is that I'm able to tap into any energy I want to, or I can have an immediate vision or forethought of the future of like any scenario, but not always accurate. But I at least have a vision of how any scenario can play
You've
out.
got a movie. You've got a movie. That's what I see.
I have a private movie theater in my head.
Yeah. Right.
So to me, that's I feel like I can literally step into like anyone's shoes when I need to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how accurately, I don't really know.
And Pisces is such a complicated sign too. I mean, you could line up 100 Pisces, you get 100 different people.
Absolutely. I mean, Mitt Romney's a Pisces, and so is John Wayne Gacy, and so
Heinz Ward is a Pisces.
Heinz Ward.
And Heinz Ward, take your head off, man. That guy was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just look. So I was the last day of Pisces, 1967. Kurt Cobain was the first day of Pisces, 1967. And then actually,
right, zero. That's right, zero Pisces.
Yep.
For Kurt Cobain. Yeah.
And Billy Corgan was actually born 3 days before me, the same year.
Oh, interesting. He's an interesting character.
He is an interesting character. Yeah, I think he's got that moon in Gemini, so he kind of goes all over the place. But I think he's like legit woke, and that's why, other than his appearances on Alex Jones, I think he keeps his mouth shut about politics, except for certain. But I think he knows I've seen him talk about reptilians and stuff. So
Billy Corgan knows what's up. He's taken a lot of heat for having unpopular decisions. And I don't watch Alex Jones very often. I haven't seen him on there for a long time.
Yeah, a few years ago, I think, when he was on there.
But extremely level-headed, and I think he took a lot of unwarranted flack from people that just saw him as being somebody on Alex Jones and wanted to put him in a bucket and really wasn't listening to what he had to say. He had a lot of really interesting things to say. So yeah, it's such a fascinating sign, Pisces, and it's also dualistic, and so we can see, mood changes and mood swings and different personas show up like storms, kind of just blowing through, the countryside. I mean, I think it's a fascinating sign. It's my opposite sign. It's my South Node. I have tons of Piscean people in my life. I'm not sure if I should be thankful for that or not, but that's the case. And so who else is born on 29 degrees? Barron Trump, a 29-degree Pisces?
Yeah, Barron Trump is a 29 Pisces. Holly Hunter is a 29 Pisces.
Wasn't Weinstein a 29 Pisces too? Harvey Weinstein?
Yes, Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, so like Pisces and Leo, like role acting. So it's like there's that ability to hide stuff and to like perform and stuff. And then, of course, like with like the Harvey Weinstein side and stuff, that can also turn like, really super dark. Because to me, like Pisces and Sagittarius have boundary issues.
Yeah.
Those two signs probably have like the biggest, like they can't separate or have problems with like stopping or knowing, because it always confused me. It's like, how is there, most Pisces are like so docile that it annoys me. Because I have Mars in Scorpio and Saturn in Aries. So like even I cannot deal with a lot of Pisces even. So I was like, how is there all these Pisces serial killers and stuff? And it's like, it's the delusion, it's the removal of boundaries within their brain to where we're all one, kumbaya, Michael row the boat ashore on one side, but also if that's dark, if that turns to the dark side, that can also be like, there's no laws or boundaries because we're all one. So I can, you can do whatever you want to anyone because of, so I think that's where like the darker side of Pisces can get into, where they're just like total drug addicts, no boundaries to anything.
Right. Great artists though. I mean, a lot of great Piscean artists. Did you read that Quincy Jones interview where he was just like all over the place, just dishing up dirt? Did you ever read that article?
I don't
interview?
think I saw that one, but I think Rashida Jones, who's his daughter, I believe, is Pisces also.
Quincy's a Pisces, and it's this amazing interview where he like cuts loose on a bunch of stuff, and he talks about Marlon Brando and Richard Pryor, and he gets into some, freaky shit. And but he asked the interviewer like, "What's his sign?" And the interviewer says, "Oh, I'm a Pisces," and Quincy Jones says, "Oh, so am I. It's the best fucking sign, man." That's what he says in the
I'll
interview.
have to find that. I don't think I've seen that.
Oh, it's a very entertaining interview, and he talks about how Marlon Brando and Richard Pryor used to do each other, and that Brando would screw a parking meter. He gets into some very interesting
Wow.
Hollywood dirt for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. So Barron Trump. Let's talk a little bit about Barron Trump. We'll transition this thing into America. He's the subject of the Ingersoll Rand books, which are very strange. And what's interesting about those books is that nobody really talked about them until Trump got elected. And it's the adventures of Barron Trump. And Barron Trump really, to me, kind of typifies as 29-degree Pisces. Like, who is he? Like, you could attach so many kinds of like meanings or projections onto him. He becomes this weird cipher and literary character to this Ingersoll Rand person. And for about a year and a half, everybody's just trying to like figure out like, how did this thing work with Barron Trump and the president, right? And the collapse of the president's hotel. I mean, the whole thing is just so bizarre. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, I mean, a Baron, is supposed to have like genius level IQ. And in fact, there's a lot of pictures of him saying like, he has a shirt that says like the genius or the mastermind or something. I mean, some people were trying to say like he was cute for a while. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not true, but there's definitely, what'll be interesting is in 2025, what happens to him when he has that Saturn, Neptune, North Node, Mars, all that stuff going over his sun. He seems to be like the quiet, mad scientist, kind of. He appears to be genius level, but very much like in his own world. And they kind of try to keep him protected and stuff. But yeah, but the similarities in those books are just like insane.
So some people say he's on the spectrum because he got vaccinated. I don't know if that's true or not, but clearly he displays sort of like this borderline savant-like kind of vibe, like a borderline savant-like vibe. He just kind of like, it just sort of, that's how he feels to me.
Not to give away like the end of the movie or anything, but just any 29 Pisces is we're only here part of the time.
Yeah.
We're not here all the time anyways.
Yeah.
We're very much out exploring other realities or whatnot.
Well, I'm glad you're here with us for the next hour and 15 minutes. So why don't we transition into, since we're talking about Barron Trump and Donald Trump in the United States, why don't we transition into the topic of the day, which is, I wanted to look at the progress chart of the United States because, I tend to drop into the USA chart fairly frequently because I think it's a really, and I use the Sibley chart. Other people don't. There's some controversy about which chart to use. I don't know. It feels like it fits to me. But
I just printed that out earlier.
So I'm going to put it up on the screen here for everybody to take a look at it. And one of the things I also want to do, and this is kind of off script because I didn't tell you that I wanted to, just kind of popped in my head. But I think we should also today look at China's chart. which is very interesting because China, celebrated its quote unquote independence, what, 2 days ago? So it's a very interesting kind of connection in some ways. I think there's a couple different charts for China. So, but let's look at the U.S. progress chart. I'm going to put it up right here, and people can see it. Okay, so there we go. I've got progressions, right there, July 4th, 1776, 5:13 p.m., Philadelphia, PA. And this is what we got, folks. This is theoretically where we're at astrologically with the progressed U.S. chart. And it makes us a Virgo rising country. Let's talk about that a little bit, Virgo, right? Let's talk about Virgo. Let's talk about health. Let's talk about Virgo rising as a sign that could be hypochondriacal, right? Looking at like what can go wrong, being obsessed with health, being obsessed with cleanliness, being obsessed with all those kinds of Virgoing details like being 6 feet apart. Let's drop into that for a minute.
I mean, the one thing that the first thing that popped out to me when looking at that is like the transiting north node is about to hit that Uranus, which is square to the ascendant there. So to me, when you're talking about the hypochondria type stuff, I mean, Uranus is kind of collective subconscious impulses, and having that like on the midheaven and square the ascendant at that point, I mean, it seems like everyone's the mental health issues in this country at this point, I think are probably the most severe problem we have, just from we have so many veterans that don't get taken care of, to now we've had everyone under a 16-month satanic ritual to where you can't leave your house or whatever. And so this is just a total like subconscious mind job that's been going on. And so I think that we already kind of had the obsession with food and fame and popular. There's already so many things to just be like subconscious and to have rolling around in the back of your brain anyways, this hypercriticalness and stuff. But then to have the transiting north node in Gemini hitting that Uranus, and like we talked at the beginning about like Ohio splitting, I think we're seeing that within the country, and that
absolutely
to continue jumping all over the place as normal. That great American eclipse in April 2024, 7 months before the election that probably won't happen. I mean, that kind of splits the country from like north to south kind of in two. And that also is going to be that great American, not to manifest this or anything, but that eclipse also cuts through the New Madrid fault line, which like
absolutely, this is what we've talked about.
Towns in Missouri in the early 1900s, the last time that went off.
Yep, absolutely. You can just look at this chart and you see that Uranus square to the ascendant, and that's like batshit crazy.
Yep.
It's crazy. You want to look at why we are living in a crazy time astrologically. It's right here. It's right here. And the way the progressions work, so the ascendant changes a degree per year. So if we go back 8 years, which would put us around 2013. Right around 2013, 2012, there's a big shift. United States is coming out of a Leo ascendant period, and 2012 and 2013 becomes a game changer because now we are into the second term of Barack Obama, and that's when things get really weird. Things get really weird in term 2. And you got the Snowden stuff, you've got Assange stuff, you've got Obama firing the generals, the rise of Black Lives Matter. It's all starting to happen post 2012, 2013. And there's this kind of idea with Obama that we're going to lead from behind, right? That's all Virgo. It's very Virgo. It's no longer, Leo out front, America's great. This is a very, very different kind of America. And this progressed Neptune at 25, retrograde, by the way, was probably not in the first house at that time, but now it's in here. Now Neptune's in the first house. What are your thoughts around that, and the wide opposition with the Sun and some of these other aspects, particularly Neptune?
So to me, Neptune is like dissolving of boundaries on one level. So like transiting Pluto is forming like an exact trine to that right now. So it's about 25. So to me, there's energy for constructive spiritual rebuild, but also any kind of squares from Neptune ends up being like addiction, delusion, that kind of thing. So we're getting the opposition from Neptune coming up. So I mean, hopefully that's some kind of seeing behind the curtain, removing the veil, maybe adding a little more truth to things and seeing what's really going on. Also, I mean, obviously they've, CERN is obviously up and operating. They're purposely trying to split our reality into two, I think. I mean, because you can, like I tell my fiance, like every day, there's the same people are saying exactly opposite things within 30 seconds of each other, and they're doing it every single day. And I mean, I'm sure I contradict myself sometimes, but when you're doing it every day during every press conference, when you're saying exact opposite thing, just like yesterday, I mean, Fauci came out and said that people should start wearing masks indoor again, and the woman who's head of the CDC the same day came out and said that there's no reason if you're vaccinated that people should have to wear masks indoors. So they're doing I don't think it can even be argued that that's being done on accident anymore. I mean, I think they're aware that there's some kind of split going, and to make everyone feel crazy and to continue the North Node in Gemini split of our collective, that I think they're kind of playing on this mental illness. I mean, it's gaslighting. Mainstream media is just continuous gaslighting. That's all it is at this point. It's just continually telling you two opposite things, and then it just, it's like to keep people, it's almost like the opposite of like, maybe the Q stuff where it's, or letter 17, if I shouldn't have said that letter. It's to where it's just like, it's the opposite. It's like keeping people from doing anything on their own. It's, waiting for the white hat or whatever to come save you, or the, white hats in the government or whatever. But it's like this continual like splitting of the consciousness, as it's like splitting into like two different levels, two different realities. Um, so I think, yeah, maybe it just feels like all that's like on purpose now at this point. And so I think that just kind of, they're trying to, just like they do with the NLP and the everything that they show us through Hollywood and everything, they're trying to get us to create this other reality where like we're just like slaves and stuff, and the elite take the spoils while we're not watching. Are you still there? Did I lose you?
Sorry about that.
All right, no problem. I just wanted to
It was a bit of a weird moment because you just put your head down, and I thought, oh my God, is he okay? And it's like, did he go off into 29 Pisces land? So then I
I couldn't tell
realized,
if you were still there. I just looked down at my phone to make sure.
no, I got disconnected from my. So this is an interesting.
I kept babbling for a minute.
That's good. That's you're a true professional. That was a test of your introversion transmutating into extroversion. So let me get this chart back up here again, because I thought we were just really starting to get rolling here, because I think this is super interesting. Super interesting. I think it gives us a real sense as to kind of what's going on and what we might be able to expect. So let me just put this together again. And thank you everybody for your patience here as I muddle through the technical trolls. It's Uranus, man, my sixth house. It's like, okay, have fun with this now. All right, let's throw these transit back up here. And let's bring Mark back into the mix with the shared screen so we can ruminate on this thing. And there we go. So we were just talking about the Pluto trine. So one of the things that I find interesting here, Mark, is that the US natal Pluto, it's normally at 27. It's now at 29. So it just moved like 2 degrees. So the US progressed Pluto is anaretic in Capricorn, right? It's at that final degree of Capricorn. And the South Node is conjunct the natal US Pluto, which would be right there at 27. So we're going to have the Pluto return next year in January, which is a big time. That first week in January, I don't know if you looked at that, Mars-Pluto conjunction, Mars-Venus-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. There's a lot going on at first, second week of January 2022. So we're going to have the Pluto return, but eventually we're going to have the Pluto conjunction with a progressed chart. And that's going to happen in the end of 2024, right? As we go into 2025, Pluto in Aquarius. So big changes here in the US. You and I are sports guys. We like sports. Let's talk about the fifth house related to sports, pastimes, activities, big changes in the world of sports.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I think everyone's kind of gotten tired of the Hollywood celebrities. So I think they're really pushing hard now on the athletes, and it's almost like there's a contest to see who can be the most woke sports league. Like we mentioned with the Buffalo Bills a couple of weeks ago, they asked the one coach or the general manager if they would cut somebody if they weren't if they hadn't been carjacked.
Right.
And so
he said yes. He was like, hey, no problem, man. Out of here. And the league kind of pushed back on that a little bit, which I thought was mildly interesting. But I think they did that just to, like, what they really want is the Brandon Bean model. who is the general manager of the Buffalo Bills, but they just can't come right out and say it. And then you have Cole Beasley come out, who's on that team, and he's like, I'm ready to walk away from this sport. If this is what you're going to do, you're going to force people to get vaccinated, have a two-tiered system here, then I'm ready to walk away from it. And I think the league needs to be careful with that. They need to, and I think they have. They haven't really dressed him down or anything, and they haven't supported him. I think they're just trying to kind of leave this thing alone for now because they don't want part of the sports public, aka Normie America, to kind of wake up to this thing. So, but we're seeing the transformation of all this stuff happening, and which league can become the most woke. Major League Baseball, you and I were just talking about that a little bit on text yesterday, and I talked about it on one of my shows. Where all of a sudden now it's not just an umpire coming out to talk to a guy who's pitching, it's the whole freaking umpire crew. I've never seen that before.
Oh, yeah. It was like a pack of sharks, like on a wounded fish. And like you said, it's probably baiting that they're going to get, one of these players is going to go off. I mean, Max Scherzer is ready to go after the other team's manager.
Joe Girardi.
Yeah. Max was about to go punch him in the face, and I probably would have laughed because yeah, I mean, if you're going against a good pitcher and he's striking everybody out, you're not getting any hits, then it's the same. Here's this horrible analogy, number 236. It's like trying to ice the field goal kicker at the end of the game by calling timeouts.
Right.
You know, the pitcher striking out every guy on your team. So you're going to go interrupt them after every other pitch. Hey, it looked like he had something on his hat. Hey, it looked like he had something on his belt.
Right. The only difference with that is that they're not going out to check the air pressure in the ball, right? Or they're not going out to check to make sure that the kicker doesn't have like a steel plate inside of his in the arch of his shoe or the instep of his shoe. But this is different because they've got this thing now with this spider tack, and now they have like this probable cause.
Right.
Instead of just randomly every now and then, because they would do this with like Gaylord Perry and some of these guys in the 70s. Every now and then they'd go out and say, hey, can you go check what, Perry's like, greasing the ball up. But this is different. This is like now they've got probable cause and they're going to do this whenever they can. It's a weird inversion of authority because the police aren't theoretically protecting people, theoretically. However, in Major League Baseball, there's this huge overreach of authority. It's very strange. It's very kind of Uranus on the midheaven in a lot of ways,
Well, and it's like somehow probably not somehow. They obviously have the owners of all the major sports involved on this. So they probably got some kind of bailout during the last big stimulus that they forced through.
Bingo.
They probably used that to feed the sports teams and the Targets of the world and the Walmarts of the world who decided that they were going to go with the woke agenda. So even these owners of pro sports teams, a lot of them are Republicans and just afraid to say it, and multiple owners have come out and said that. So, but this is just a question that I've had. It's like how many of these gigantic bailouts if I'm the owner of a pro sports team and I'm willing to get bullied or take a payout for, if I think it's for the good of the country or whatever, to have my team not have people in the stands for a year or whatever, and they're gonna pay me back for some of the money that I miss. How long can that go on? I mean, on one level, this is about destroying every sport that is American and replacing it with soccer or European something.
Right.
And so, even like the WNBA is the woke of the I mean, like even Twitter isn't woke enough for the WNBA now. So I don't know. You saw they just had an article on ESPN the magazine where there's a player who uh, she's married, or they're married.
Mark. She's not even a player.
Right. She's been cut since then. That's right. She got cut before this article even came out. But they let her. She used 6 genders
Yeah.
in the article, and there was a note from the editor saying that this person uses 6 different genders, and it's okay. And then they come out the next day with an article that the WNBA has 99% of their players vaccinated, and they're the shining glory of all the sports leagues.
Right. And then you have the women's national soccer team with Megan Rapinoe doing sort of another. They're not talking about the men's teams. They don't talk about the men's soccer team.
Yep.
But Megan Rapinoe and the women's team and the WNBA and they try to promote a female executive or female referee at every turn that they can now. And you can just see this down here with Pluto in the 5th house, and you've got, the square to Venus with progressed Venus and Taurus. You got this big T square going on. And again, this is all about pastimes and sports, and they're basically disassembling the United States with these pastimes that we've become known for. I saw a very disturbing video on Twitter so I follow Troy Vincent, Troy Vincent is the epitome of a woke servant of the NFL and corporate America. And he plays the role of like a uniform cop. I mean, really, that's what Troy Vincent's role is. He used to play in the NFL, play defensive backs, I think, for the Eagles and for the Dolphins. But he uses his Twitter feed to promote equity and diversity and all this other stuff. And he retweeted a tweet where there's this guy who's married to another guy. He's a Buffalo Bills fan. And he and this guy have this like 9-year-old boy, and they got the 9-year-old boy to say the NFL is this, the NFL is that, the NFL is, and one of the things with the 9-year-old boy is the NFL is gay, the NFL is trans, the NFL is like, they use this 9-year-old boy. I'm assuming he's 9, he might even be younger, like 7 or 8. And they use this little boy to promote this message that the NFL is American, but it's not just American. It's like, it's a rainbow, right? It's a rainbow. And Troy Vincent is retweeting this stuff. And I'm looking at this thing. I'm like, why are you using a 9-year-old kid to promote this message? Or 8-year-old. He's not even 9. He's probably about 7 or 8. Why are you using this kid to promote this message? And why is everybody clapping and lying? It's fucking manipulative is what it is.
Right. You just, you can't just, and this gets into like the Ibrahim Kendi stuff, where it's like you can't just go along with certain things. You have to, like, it's about retribution. It's like there has to be you can't just appreciate someone's differences, and you can't be independent. You have to stand up every day and applaud these other things. If you don't help build it, you can't just allow the parade to go on. If you don't actively participate in the parade, then you're a racist bigot or
right.
whatever foe. You have to, it's not enough to just like let people alone. You have to actively participate in stuff. It's browbeating. You have to actively participate in everything you don't like, or else you're a terrorist.
And where is the bottom with that? Like, where is the bottom? Because it's never enough.
No. That's why you never ever apologize when if you cannot apologize, because it's never enough. It's never enough. And another thing too on that has popped into my head for a couple years is, how long was some of this planned? Because like Saturn Capricorn has a lot to do with gender assignment So that's kind of like your public standing and how the world sees you. So did they plan this when we had this Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn in the the early 90s? Did they start planning this then, knowing that there would be this Saturn-Pluto-Jupiter stellium hitting the natal Uranus-Neptune conjunction of that generation? That they would, because they're woke. So was this planned beforehand for the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Capricorn stellium to um, woke these people up?
So what Mark is referring to is the Neptune-Uranus conjunction in Capricorn, which took place in right around the early mid-90s, and when Pluto was in Scorpio. What's interesting about that time in the early 90s is you see a real uptick in the vaccination schedule. Major addition to the vaccination schedule. And that's, I think, part of the discussion. It's part of the discussion and part of, altering the theoretical, biological animal like human. And you just follow that thread forward and look where we are now. And who's fighting the most for the vaccines? Right?
So a discussion that we've had a lot around the house here recently is as the carjackings escalate, what happens when Pluto hits 0 Aquarius?
Oh, God.
What happens to the carjack victims?
Yeah. Well, all of a sudden the internal Wi-Fi kick in. I mean, that's going to be 4 years from now, and I think, I think we got a lot of ground to cover before then, and some very again, this first and second week in January of 2022, you've got Mars and Venus in Capricorn. They're going to be conjuncting Pluto, transiting Pluto in Capricorn, and all three will be conjuncting the US natal Pluto. That's going to be, I think, a very intense time, and I feel like we're going to have some insight into where these carjackings are going. And then the whole 2025 thing with Pluto and Aquarius, that's a whole other discussion. My feeling about that is that if we play this thing out and kind of look at already what's happened, I think biological births are going to be harder and harder to come by. And Pluto represents generation. It represents regeneration, life and death. Pluto is the planetary cord that connects us to this world. And when it goes into Aquarius, we're talking about science. We're talking about, something very, very different as it relates to birth. That's my sense. We're in a whole different realm of creating babies, or not creating babies for that matter. That's my sense.
Yeah, and I think the Pluto and Aquarius too, I think, is very much the energy of it's the Frankenstein energy.
Yes.
Pluto, death, rebirth, transformation. Aquarius, mad scientist.
Right. Let's break out the CRISPR. Let's break out the CRISPR kits.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Mars here. We got Mars in Libra, which to me, Mars in Libra is in a lot of ways the personification of a social justice aspect. Now, it can also be kind of righteous indignation about things being unfair or imbalanced. So it can go either way. It doesn't necessarily have to be Ocasio-Cortez, who does have Mars in Libra, by the way. But it certainly feels like it's tilted in that direction in this kind of progress movement of Mars in Libra and it's retrograde. Right? It's retrograde, and we have it in the second house, which is foundational. And we've got this Black Moon Lilith conjunction here. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. So, so Mars is in kind of its opposite sign there. So that can be good at bringing like some balance and stuff, but I would have to strongly say that I'm not a fan of Black Moon Lilith conjunct anything, like ever, really. Like it can stay in its own. I can't think of a Black Moon Lilith transit that I was overly fond of.
Right. Yeah.
But two, it's so just one of the, I guess, the kind of go down to beginner level astrology for a second. So like all the signs have like a big misnomer about them, like or an incomplete nomer. So like Libras are supposed to have balance, and actually I found that like Libras maybe have the least balance of any.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But they're but it's their deal to achieve balance.
Right.
And I can say the same thing with Pisces. Some of the Pisces I know are like Pisces is spirituality, but also like a lot of Pisces are like some of the least spiritual people that I know. It's like that's your thing to achieve or to work on. You're not necessarily like blessed with it from the second the stork drops you or so I found that it like especially with like Mars and Libra, like that would be that energy is greatly out of whack and it's going to, and during that kind of a transit, that energy is going to go more out of whack before it comes back to balance. And like there's a better chance for it to come back to balance at the end. At the first half of that transit is going to be, well, we're going to show you how out of balance everything is first before you fix anything.
Right. Yeah. So I remember looking at this progressed chart a few years ago, and Mars was in Libra, but I'm not sure it was retrograde. Like, and I don't know. I don't have the ability to calculate that. But usually, when Mars goes retrograde, it stays retrograde for a very long time, super long time.
Yeah, so I know that looking at like solar return charts and stuff, like it's supposed to be a really big deal when a planet changes direction in your chart, because like Mars has, but just like in my chart, Mars has been retrograde my entire life, even by progression. I've got like 6 or 7 more years before Mars will turn direct in my progressed chart even. So yeah, so it'll stay a long time in that, and so as it I mean and Mars isn't happy being retrograde.
No, it wants to move forward. It wants to.
Yeah.
It wants to express and blow off steam and
gets frustrated by the lack of movement.
Yeah. Well, I have Mars retrograde progressed in my chart, my progress chart, and I'd like it to move on one of these days. It'd be nice. It would be very nice. The thing that's very interesting about this, we've got a T-square here. So we have this T-square with Jupiter, which is going to just blow everything up. It's going to make it bigger. And in retrograde Cancer, more emotional. Like this is kind of hysterical, right? This square right here, this part of the square. And then you throw in Chiron, which is this male energy, right? The wounded male. You've got Mars retrograde, kind of, trying to find this balance thing with Black Moon Lilith here, which is dark and kind of manipulative. And you've got this, everything's getting blown up and blown out of proportion. This is I think with this chart, you've got the Neptune Sun opposition, you've got this T-square, and then you've got some of the other stuff going on. I think this T-square is very difficult for the country as a whole. It's not good for men. It's not good for our community or how we share the message, because Jupiter's retrograde, it's moving backwards. And we've got this kind of, cracked open, crazy, emotional expansion. But there's also another thing here too. And you can kind of see this with the Trump stuff, where you can kind of see this Jupiter retrograde in Cancer wanting to go back to a different time, a time that's more, family oriented or has those Cancerian values. And you can see that there. And it almost feels like there's this battle going on between how this thing is going to get played out, with Chiron sort of taking risks and being wounded in the silent majority in the 8th house. And then you've got this other thing with SJW kind of in the 2nd house. I think this is a really intense aspect.
Right. So even just, I'll point out something too that you texted me yesterday. So even look too, that Mars is square to Jupiter in Cancer. So what do we have now? We have like Mars, athletic activity, sports, square to Jupiter, which is also sports, and the sign
That's
of
right.
the female energy. So now we have this attack on women's sports.
There we go, right?
And then,
yes.
And then so the Chiron square to that is asking for healing. But again, just like, the Mars, so Jupiter is one of those signs, I think, that has perhaps an unjust good reputation. Like people just assume that all Jupiter transits are good.
Not always.
I learned this from fantasy football a few years ago, because there was a couple years in a row I went heavy in on quarterbacks that had Jupiter on their sun, and then both years those guys got injured, and then I kind of realized that, okay, Jupiter is expansion, and expansion is good, but not if it's like it's like trying to jam a watermelon down a garbage disposal.
So who are we talking about? Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson?
No, this was like 4 and 5 years ago. It was Andrew Luck was one of them.
It was a Virgo. Andrew Luck's a Virgo, right?
It was when Jupiter was in Virgo, and he had really moved up a notch the year before. And I'm like, oh man, I'm taking Andrew Luck in every league the next year.
Did he get hurt?
That was the first year he got hurt.
Yeah.
And then I think that the other one who I think was 2 years after that, and it was Philip Rivers, who had Jupiter on his sun, but then also he had Neptune square his sun, and that was the year where he threw like 28 interceptions or something.
He just had more kids. He just had more kids. That's how that got worked out.
That's right. That was his Jupiter Mars square.
If you were playing fantasy family league, you would have done really well with with Rivers that season. What an odd character. Is he going to play this year, or is he done?
No, he's retired. I think he's had enough. Which I don't know why he moved to Indianapolis for what. So now they brought in the next, the most injured player in the NFL in the last 5 years to take his place, of course.
What is up with Nick Foles? He's a Capricorn. And somehow he's just not really liked. They didn't like him in Philadelphia. What's up with Nick Foles?
I think that he's an Aquarius. And I think the deal with him...
Not Nick Foles, I'm sorry. No, not Nick Foles. Nick Foles, the other guy. I'm sorry.
Carson Wentz.
No, everybody loves Nick Foles, the Aquarian. Yeah. Oh, they love him.
He can't play. Nick Foles can't play unless there's some kind of urgency or unexpected. He can only play if he's replacing an injured guy.
He's such an Aquarian that way. Nick Foles is such an Aquarius that way. Okay, I think he's 0 Aquarius, by the way.
Yes.
So he can only play if there's a catastrophe or something off script happens. Oh,
yep.
Guess what? Well, Nick Foles is here. Okay, well, let's go win a Super Bowl. I'm sorry, Carson Wentz. Let's win a Super Bowl. No, I was talking about Wentz, who is the opposite. He's for some reason he's so unlikable with his teammates. He's a Capricorn. Do you have any insight into that? I mean, with his sign or just with him in general?
I mean, I think he's probably very I have every chart of everyone on the face of the earth on here. So he's got the pretty tight Uranus Neptune conjunction. It's within a degree, but then he's also got Saturn and Venus in Aquarius, and it looks like he's got Moon in Pisces also. So I think part of it is maybe people don't know how to read him, because that Saturn and Venus and Aquarius can be kind of like emotionally aloof.
Right.
And that Moon in Pisces, I mean, I don't have his time of birth, so he could actually be Moon 29 Pisces. I don't know if he is or not, but so he's got that. I think Pisces scare people sometimes because they don't know, like they can tell there's something going on, but like they don't know what's going on behind there. And it's like half the time we're just like traveling in outer space or something. But I think just some people just they don't know what's going on. So he's also Carson Wentz also has Mars opposite his Uranus Neptune conjunction. So I
Oh,
think there's just a lot of like he can be abrasive, but I think sometimes it's just more that he's aloof with that Aquarius and Pisces stuff, and maybe just people just don't know what's going on, and like he maybe doesn't communicate very well, and so I think, I mean, maybe he actually cares and likes his teammates, but like maybe they just don't know it because he's got the Capricorn stiff upper lip and then the Aquarius and Pisces stuff. So I think it might just be like people just don't know how to read him.
right. Well, yeah, very interesting. I just remember like watching linemen not block for him,
Oh yeah,
Watching Nelson Aguilar and Alshon Jeffrey almost drop passes on purpose, cut their route short, like just really bizarre stuff around Carson Wentz. Very strange.
right. I would say there are definitely some people that don't like him.
Yeah.
Justified or not, there's
Well,
definitely
Doug Peters, not Frank Reich does, so I think that's all that counts for now.
yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Mercury here in Aquarius. I think this is a really interesting aspect. Sixth house, health, Mercury, science, Aquarius, fixed. Does that sound familiar right now?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so I'm like, we've talked about similar stuff a lot here recently too. It's like there is some earth energy out there right now, and there's some fixed energy, but it's like Pluto in the last decan of Capricorn and Uranus, or there's the Taurus energy, but it's Uranus in Taurus. So it's like even the earth energy right now is like not stable.
Right.
And that's kind of a similar thing there, where so like the transiting Saturn is hitting the moon, jumping in between the midpoints of the of Moon and Mercury there. Uh, so it's just, and just another difficult thing with right now. It's like it's really hard to make predictions on anything that's going to happen, because with Neptune in late Pisces and then this Aquarius energy, it's like normal outcomes are not what we normally get.
And even with the nodes in Gemini, where we're
Yep.
living in separate realities, I think that's going to change a little bit when the nodes change,
Uh,
and we get the true node in Taurus, South node in Scorpio. Things become a little bit more finite, definite, for better or worse. It may not. It could be both, right? It could be both. Like some of the limits that come through during that time could be stifling too.
right. There's been so many, it's like last week everyone was talking about the full moon or whatever it was, and I'm like, okay, we had Jupiter, Mercury, and Neptune stationed within 6 days of each other. Two of them in Pisces, one of them in Gemini, and Mercury and Neptune square to each other. So I'm like that. There's no. It's so frustrating right now because there's no footing. So I think
No.
that's what the nodes will maybe improve next year.
Yeah.
But it's like there's nowhere that you can like, okay, I'm gonna dig my heel in here and then work my way out. And there's like there's nowhere to get firm footing on anything.
Right.
Two
Right.
planets and Earth signs are like destructive. I mean, it's Pluto and Uranus.
That's right. Yep. This Mercury here, Aquarius, to me, this typifies this fixed kind of idea, this fixed kind of plan, this fixed kind of very scientific, don't question the science kind of mentality in the sixth house. And Mercury's got this trine with Mars, which to me is the carjack army. That's the carjack army right there. This Mars Mercury trine, but it's not working out the way they'd like it to because Mars is retrograde there. And then we've got this Mercury sextile with Chiron, and Chiron in Aries is like the human, right? It is the human, and it's like, okay, well, we got easy access into the human here. You know, we're going to get into that eighth house. We're going to get beneath things. We're going to get right into the bloodstream, right? Easy access into the bloodstream because Aries represents blood. And then you've got sort of this series, this kind of, you know, the fairy person or the fairy man or the fairy woman sort of, you know, being sort of this guardian of the eighth house and, you know, initiating people into this eighth house experience. To me, this is kind of frightening. This trine, this sextile, and then next year, towards the end of next year, you're gonna have the Saturn-Mercury conjunction. What are your thoughts on this conjunction with transiting Mercury hitting this transiting Saturn hitting this progressed Mercury?
Right. So to me, Aquarius is, it's that Frankenstein energy, but it's also it's outside the box thinking. Like, you can look and say that that's going to be something weird, but you can also say that it's probably going to be some mutation that we're not really expecting. So too, I mean, at this point, in this point in human history, I mean, Aquarius has to align with the internet because that's like the most important. I mean, we're doing this on the internet.
Right.
So Saturn, you would think, has got to be, you know, continued the lockdowns and shutting down of information, Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
But also too, out of all of that breeds new creation too, right? I mean, you had your YouTube channel shut, so you went through a series of having to redefine how you use the internet and what internet outlets you used and how you broadcast your message out to people and stuff. So I would say that the authoritarianism from one side is going to keep continuing. But I mean, I think like at a point, like, I mean, Twitter's going to eat itself. I mean, because people actually think that like I still have my Twitter account and it's good to see like news footage of stuff, but like just when I start just typing in twitter.com into my browser, like I start feeling hatred coming over. I mean, before I'm even on the site, I'm like, oh my God, do I want to do this? Do I want to go on?
I have fallen back in love with Twitter. Like I moved off of Facebook because I just didn't like what was going on with Facebook. They were censoring my group right and left, and I'm like, so Twitter. This is my second go around with Twitter. My first account got nuked. Now it's my second go around. It's more fun. I've got a much better thread. I really sort of judicious about who I want to connect with in a lot of ways. And I found that for the most part, Twitter has been kind of hands off with a lot of the stuff I've been posting, except for yesterday. I got banned for 12 hours yesterday. And it was something I put up on Mike Florio's site, or his thread, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, I do, you know, I had to adapt, but I've got a fair amount of mutable energy in my chart, so I was able to kind of do that. But to me, and maybe to your point here, this Saturn-Mercury conjunction, I think is like lockdown, it's law. It's like, look at your Saturn's authority. Look, this is what you're going to have to do to work, right? The sixth house is work. This is what you're going to have to do to work, to stay healthy. Saturn is making commands here, right? It's making big, bold statements. Now, conversely, and I think you touched on this as well, sometimes it doesn't always work out the way they think it's going to work out, especially with Aquarius. So they can get big and bold and hard and heavy, but it could create something different. Like there could be something that comes out of it that is completely unexpected. And you could have people creating like new types of work or new forms of compensation that are going to be outside the box, just like you talked about.
Yeah. I mean, like I've been telling people, and it's like the if you want to jump to the end game, we should just as much. I know everyone can't do it in every area like immediately, but we just stop feeding into their economy. We just start in your area and just like, okay, where can I get this stuff that I need supplied, and just drain their economy, drain the fake economy that they're continually pumping stuff into and blacklisting people and censoring people. Find another way to do it. It's Mike Lindell or somebody is like going to start his own like he's going to start his own version of Amazon. I mean, it's not going to be nearly as big, but he's going to start with like, basic products that people need, and he's going to try and put together a delivery team, and then that's how you start. You got to, I mean, the sooner you can stop feeding into the system that hates you, the sooner you're going to get the key to your jail cell. I mean,
that's well put. That's well put. That's really well put. What happened to Lindell's big media thing, Frank? Whatever happened to that?
All I heard was that like 2 billion people tried to get on it the first day, and it whacked it, and he was trying to get something. He was trying to get it up back and going. But yeah, I know a couple of people that tried to sign up, and like they couldn't. There was so much traffic they couldn't even get on
it. Yeah. All right, let's bring this pony back into the barn here. But before we do that, let's talk about this aspect, which I'm sure you'll have a lot to say about, which is the U.S. progressed sun in Pisces at 16 degrees. We have a Pallas conjunction, and it's in the 7th house. And we've got a square to Uranus, and then we have the opposition to Neptune, and then we have the inconjunct to Mars. This is pretty complex stuff here. What's your initial take on this?
Yeah, so I was trying to remember, you've brought this up a couple times recently. Isn't Pallas the one that has to do with picking out trends and
pattern recognition? Pallas is
pattern recognition.
And by the way, in Pisces, it's really psychic. Like it's like super psychic.
Right. So I think that that's a real key, because I think we're seeing that. So us and some of our crowd, we've been trying for a long time to wake people up, and it's not, it's like, I think we all woke a certain amount of people up, but really we're not doing nearly as good a job as Jen Psaki and Kamala and some of these other people. I mean, they're just like, and Tony and some of them, I mean, they're waking up far more people on a daily basis than I ever did.
It's a really good point.
On my best day, because
it's a really good point.
It's, if I say, hey, look, look at the lizard, it's one thing, but like when the person takes their human mask off and you see that they're a lizard, that's going to do a lot more than.
It's true.
And I am full of lizard analogies, believe you me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the pattern, I know I go on these crazy tangents and never make it back home sometimes, but yeah, the Sun Pallas thing. I mean, I think there are more people being able to see the pattern the patterns and the scripts that are being used against them, because they're been using the same playbook for since Bolshevik Revolution. um, I think people actually being able to put some of these patterns together now. And then,
Yes.
with the Uranus square, I mean, that's just like, that's everything going crazy, and they're trying to scramble everyone. The collective unconscious is becoming scrambled or mentally ill. And then with that, the quincunx there to Mars, I mean, the quincunx is, some adjustment necessary.
And it's
So,
not always easy because there's no clear path. I mean, you look at the broken line, you got to figure out how to kind of intuit into that. And we're dealing with Mars, we're dealing with all those kinds of issues that we've been touching on here. Um, what do you think of Sun in the seventh house in Pisces as it relates to things like gender and identity, the relationship to relationship? Like, it's kind of confusing, don't you think?
right. Well, yeah, yeah. So anything Pisces or Neptune is going to be foggy.
Yeah.
So it's going to be so to me, when stuff's foggy, that's where you uh, look probably less at outside sources, and you have to go inward to get the proper answer to those kind of things. So I mean, I think everyone can kind of see that there's let's take the other side's viewpoint. So what are they what's trying to be done right now? They're trying to, you know scientifically, people are one sex or the other. They're trying to fog that up.
Right.
They're trying to cause confusion and stuff.
Right.
And some of it's by misdirecting things. So like every man, woman that's ever lived has went through puberty when they were 12 or 13 or 14 or 11, whatever. But everyone's had that experience of like, okay, my world's been overrun with crazy. So like what's trying to be done is they're trying to tell you that means not that you're going through puberty and that your body's changing and your reality's changing. They're trying to tell you that that's signaling that you're the wrong sex for what you're supposed to be.
Right.
So it goes back to let's change the definition of everything
Yeah.
and make it as vague as possible so that we can never be held accountable to anything, because we're going to change the definition on everything.
Great point. Great point. Okay, let's go 14 years into the future. Progress US Sun hits 0 Aries. Right, so we're talking 2035, 2036, 2036.
2036.
2036. That's 15 years, 14 years into the future, roughly. Right, so 14, so it'll be 2035. And the progress US Sun will be in Aries, like a new beginning, like a new spring, a new time, a new season. What are your thoughts on that? Let's kind of end on this kind of idea of a new beginning and what that could look like.
Right. So part of the 2024, 2025 stuff with the Saturn Neptune that I looked at at 29 Pisces, 0 Aries, I went back in history and kind of looked at what was happening when we had like those big conjunctions at 29 Pisces, last degree of the zodiac, 0 Aries, the first degree. So I think that would apply to this too. And so like one of the recent times was around like 865 AD, and that kind of signaled like the late stages. You didn't know this was going to be a history lesson too. So this is kind of like towards the end of like the Viking era, and I believe it was, I may have this for Alfred the Great, I believe, and like kind of some of the pagan gods being converted, of course. and then like Christianity kind of taking over some of those areas that were still like mostly like pagan, although of course we understand they're all the same gods, they just changed the names. But so to me that's kind of a, that's like the 29 Pisces to 0 Aries is the culmination of everything to the point where there is nothing, and then things have to start a new cycle over from the beginning.
That's right.
So it's like we figure out many things and then realize that a lot of the stuff we figured out is just worthless. And so then you like start at the beginning. And so it's like an expansion contraction thing, like a lot of these transits are like jellyfish. They expand and contract, and then at a point, like once you assimilated everything, then it becomes something totally new. And I think that's kind of the step from that 29 Pisces to 0 Aries. So I did, obviously these next few years with Pluto at the end of Capricorn is going to be the breakdown of anything that isn't real or anything that's been a lie.
Right.
Same thing with the Neptune and Pisces. There'll be more and more and more delusion and more lies, and until everything that's fake is figured out.
Right. Right.
And so then there will have to be like a new birth, a new beginning of something.
I would agree. Maybe that would be the new first turning or the next first turning, although I think it might happen before then. But real quick, before we get out of here, the country's going to go through its lunar return, progressed lunar return, right? So what is it? 20, is it 28 or 27 Aquarius? Is that where the U.S. moon is?
I believe. I believe that is correct. I've got it right here. 2025, I think, natally.
25 natally. So we're talking next year, right? By the end of next year, lunar return for the U.S., right? And
yeah.
kooky, crazy Aquarius. That'll be interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that goes back to the same. So like I'll follow. So like when people will ask me about like lunar return charts and progress and stuff, and it's like, so like for like a person, like the moon will stay in a progress sign for about roughly 2.5 years. So like when you have those lunar returns, or when the progressed moon changes sign by progression in your chart, to me, like if you have the same, you will experience the same events differently. So like when you have like a lunar return or any planetary return, that means you gained experience in all 12 signs and all 12 houses that it's went through in that cycle. So that should give you like, that should move you on to the next level of experience or understanding. So hopefully this, when you're looking at a country, hopefully that is like a new way of relating and a new way of, oh, so you got booted off again, I think. I'll just fill here for a minute. So I think that's a new way of relating, a new understanding, emotionally of how things work and how to emotionally deal with things. So I've always thought that like if you have an event happen when your progressed moon is in one sign, and then it happens again, several years later when the progressed moon's in that sign again. You're going to, or in a different sign, you'll experience those things very differently because the emotional state you're coming from is completely different. According to where by progression. We'll bring Stella up here as co-host for a minute till Robert pops back on. And same thing too, but when any planet in your chart changes sign by progression, you're going to experience things differently than you did when it was, in a different sign. So just an example here, like after with the moon in Aquarius, it will come back. You're going to have a detached emotional view of things. But like by progression, when we get into like Pisces, you're going to have a much more like intuitive, holistic, open to nature. You're going to be a much more sensitive to things than when the moon's in Aquarius. So hopefully this, and moon in Aquarius is kind of electric and chaotic by nature. So hopefully by the time when we get up and complete this lunar return, we will have figured out a lot of things about how, like, as a country we interact and how the people interact and what's like really emotionally important. And we figure out, how we like, moon in Aquarius too can be like electronic emotional manipulation on one level. So that can be, clickbait is moon in Aquarius, right? It's trying to electronic stimulus used to try and get an emotional response out of you. So, perhaps maybe too on one level, this is not giving an emotional reaction